welcome Chris Stanton. Really nice to speak to you in person because we've chatted a bit and I read your Substack and you read mine.
So nice to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Ross. It's very nice to meet you in person as well.
Yeah, so I just thought we'd have a little chat about a few things that I'm curious about and interested in, and that I think we maybe have some aspects in common. You do a lot of humor. You're really a humor writer. I dabble.
You did.
Sometimes I'm being funny and sometimes I'm being quite serious, but I love comedy. I love humor writing. I've had to work at finding my funny because I
Yeah.
think I was a very serious child and yeah, I had to learn a lighter hearted approach to life. But comedy has always been my medicine. It feels right that I'm starting my chat to other authors on Substack with you. So tell us a little bit, Chris. Tell us about Chris Stanton. Who are you? Just a little introduction.
Sure. I am Chris Stanton. I live right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the States. I am a marketing, advertising copywriter and creative director. I've been a creative director for 18 years, writer for much longer. So I have always written other things besides the work stuff. Used to write some short stories and things, and wrote about 80% of the first draft of a novel that never got finished. And now I'm happily writing on Substack comedic stuff, comedic essays and other things like that.
Yeah. So your Substack's called Stantonland. And has it always been called that or did you change it?
I've changed it. First of all, before I knew you could even name it, it was just my name. Then later, I changed it to, it was called Just About Glad, which I named after an Elvis Costello song because I love Elvis Costello.
Oh, well, okay. There's a link.
You know what I'm there?
I used to be a huge fan. I saw him, probably seen him live more than I've seen any other artist.
So the thinking behind that name was that, like, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but not quite exactly all the way. So Just About Glad felt funny to me. And I had a funny little graphic on my team. But after a little while, I realized that it didn't convey anything. It didn't really tell any readers what this was about or what you should expect, really. I rethought it. And then that's when I came up with Stantonland. And the reason I went with that was because I wanted my name in it for branding purposes. I thought that would be a good move. But I didn't want it to just be my name. I wanted it to be something that tipped you off as to what you were going to be getting. And together with the graphic and the sort of tagline, amusements and curiosities, it has a very circus feel. It has a very kind of carnival circus feel, which is what I wanted. I wanted it to be, oh, this is going to be entertaining. Whatever this is, if you see it, you're going to think, well, this guy's trying to entertain me anyway. Let's see if he does. So I wanted, it also gave me the freedom to write some different kinds of things. Like I'll write essays most of the time, but I also write some shorter humor pieces that are just more absurd. So it gave me that kind of freedom to basically just pursue different kinds of humor writing.
Yeah, I think that's right. It does work very well for branding. My name's so boring, I can't, honestly. Yes. That is so boring. Yeah, I did once do a residency at a barber's, though. I did barber at the barber's, and I went to a traditional barber shop, and I sat there. It was all guys coming in for haircuts. I listened to lots of men having conversation with their barbers and wrote poems about them, which was really. The barber shop itself was a very old historical one. It had been there since the 19th century. And so I did a little bit of local history research as well. But that's all I've managed to get out of my name.
Good man.
Was a while ago. I think it was pretty much the first Arts Council thing when there was still quite a lot of funding for the arts in the UK. That was my first Arts Council project that got funded. Humor writing, you've been doing that a long time.
Yeah, even when I was writing short stories and the novel and things, they were always funny, or I hope anyway, they were funny. That's really the kind of thing that I'm interested in. It's largely what I like to read. I like to read all kinds of things besides that, but I always enjoy that, from Robert Benchley up to David Sedaris, like all this, like a lot of different types of humor. But so, yeah, I guess I could write more serious stuff. And actually, the essay I'm working on for this week is a little more serious than most. It has a very kind of darker subject matter, but I'm still trying to infuse some humor in there as much as I can.
Yeah, it's helpful, right? Oh, the dark is down.
Yeah, I think so. And so was it a conscious decision that you wanted to start adding more humor to yours?
Where did it go? The first very early piece, I had a very dark piece that I began with when I came to Substack. But it had been a newsletter on MailChimp, and people would sometimes email me after I'd sent them a newsletter saying, "You really made me laugh. I don't know why."
Could be taken a couple of different ways.
I think that what my humor is generally described as is wry. So it's not belly laugh stuff. Although I am recently people going, yeah, I laughed out loud. I mean, that's a win for me because I'm developing towards the laugh out loud, not just the little wry smile.
Yeah.
I think it's that I love comedy so much. I watch a lot of stand-up. I like to go out to stand-up. And I've done some stand-up because I wanted to develop my funny bone. I've done a clown workshop with a couple of friends of mine who were extremely funny clowns, basically. I don't mean circus clowns. I do mean in the French sense that the absurdity of humanity is what they focus on. And I don't know, I think humor is it's a fantastic tool in so many ways. I think it's more and more important in times of crisis when the world looks dark. I wrote a piece on Substack last year about laughing myself out of a neurological disorder, which is slightly exaggerated, but only slightly, because I was having serious balance problems and vertigo. And I went to go to the Edinburgh Festival, spent a whole week watching stand-up. I was watching 4 to 6 shows a day, and I got better. And I'd been ill for months, and it's just I spent all day laughing.
That's so interesting. I do remember that now that you mention that. Wow.
Anything we can find that can lighten us up is extremely helpful. And I am writing about serious stuff quite often, but I think it's important to put it in perspective. It's very valuable if you can find any kind of humor in something dark, because it just relieves you, it relieves the reader. And humans are absurd anyway. And it's great to point that out and not take yourself too seriously as well. I love Daniel Piper and his serious literary author, but I'm in touch with a world that doesn't expose itself in quite the way that obviously he does in his mockery of it. But I'm considered by some people to be a serious literary author. And I've been in rooms where people do take themselves very seriously in that way.
And wanting some serious awards. And so I'm sure you are in those circles. And I'm sure also some of the people are probably easier to be around than others.
Yeah, I actually prefer novelists to poets. Having said that, I married a poet and I've got lots of friends who are poets, but poets can be some of the most pompous. And I think really because they're the most insecure, because poetry is so undervalued and there's so little money in it, and they're really fighting over very limited territory. I've heard it described as a knife fight in a phone box and 2 bald men fighting over a comb. It's got that quality to it. I found poetry world extremely backbiting, and I was happy to slide out the back door and slide into prose. Writing novels and writing on Substack as well has just been a joy because the community is so good.
Yes.
So many clever, funny, brilliant, deep thinking people who understand nuance. I thought that was dead. I thought it was extinct.
I know you need. It's always so amazing to me how supportive everyone is of each other and the quality. There's so many super talented writers on.
I know. The reading is great. One thing I would say that for me has been a bit of a downside is I know I'm reading less books because I'm reading a lot of Substack articles, and I'm trying to find a way to put more books back in my life because it's so easy to just read another great article, another great article.
If you figure it out, I mean,
balance.
Yes.
But yeah, there's so much that feels like I'm nourishing myself reading in that environment. And the excellence just makes you want to raise your game more and more.
Yeah.
So,
I just feel like I stumble upon topics that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I learn things that I wouldn't have otherwise. And exposed to different points of view. It's just, and it's never ending. That's why it's so hard to get to read other things.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm learning stuff all the time. And yeah, it's a very enriching environment. It's great for readers and writers. Of course, most writers are readers as well. And it informs your own stuff then. Now, the piece I'm writing this week is very much coming out of some recent experiences of mine, but also 4 pieces that I've read recently that have all felt like they interconnect and are leading in the same direction. And it's very helpful in developing and coalescing lines of thought. And yeah, it's powerful. I want to talk a little bit about writing, the writing process. How long do you take over writing? I'm sure it varies a bit, but how much do you give to a weekly piece on Substack?
A great question. More than I should, probably. It's several hours. And the problem is that I can't just sit down. I don't have the time to just sit down and try to knock out a first draft all at once. Generally speaking, I don't have time to do that. So I'm chipping away at a first draft throughout the week, like at night, or if I have a small break during the day at work,
Yeah.
I'll do that. And then by Wednesday, Thursday, I'm really polishing. And Thursday, I'm usually polishing. Behind this week, but I will be polishing. Seems to finish the first draft.
Yeah. Yeah. So putting it in around a full-time job is quite a commitment when you're posting weekly, like you are. You always how long have you been posting weekly for?
It'll be 2 years in June. Yeah. And that's the thing. When I started it, I made that commitment to myself, but I had no idea if I could uphold it, if I could keep that commitment to myself. And
Yeah.
but really wanted to. So I kept that. And then what I found was, first of all, the first essay I wrote for Substack was way too long. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this this is just, this is taking too. And then I figured out, oh, I don't have to write this long every week. And nor should I, because sometimes I'll get a longer piece on there, and other times maybe 1,500, 1,600 words. And that's enough for a lot of writing. I could keep writing same stuff over and over again. If I need to be a diligent editor with myself, I can overwrite nobody's business. So there's a lot of cutting that goes.
And which is great and such an important part of it. And yeah, I always feel at the moment, I keep being up against the wire and feeling like I'm not getting as much time to let it sit and edit it. Yeah. I'm seriously thinking about going to once every 2 weeks, but it's also at the same time, it's addictive and I want to keep it up, but I need to be working more on some other things. So I'm weighing that up right now because it is a big time commitment. But I do find on Substack, if something's written really well, you don't mind too much how long it is. But there are some times that you just go, I'm gone now. I've gone in. You've lost me now. Time is precious, isn't it? So as a writer, be aware of that.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to have that experience.
No.
Yeah. But like you said, I would really love a little more time to just sit with it. I'd love a day or two to not look at it and then come back. But I don't have that.
I think when I started, I was like doing it a week or two ahead, but gradually my lead-in time has got crushed. So quite often I'm still working on it right up until the time it's meant to be going out. And that's with me being redundant now, not having that. So that's such a terrible label. I hate that word so much. I'm redundant. I'm useless. No longer have a proper job. But at the same time, of course, I'm trying to generate income. And Substack is part of that. It's a really important part of that for me because I love the possibility. Obviously, at the moment, it's paying all my bills or anything, but it's paying some. And the idea of actually being able to get an independent income, it's not dependent on publishers and their lead-in times and their understanding of the market and whether they think you fit it and all the rest of it. I love the idea of actually being able to make a living just doing what I've spent my whole life getting really good at, and rather than teaching other people to do it, which is what I've been doing for the last 3 decades. Yeah.
And that's my goal too. I would love to. I have some paying subscribers and I'm grateful for those, but I'd like to grow that number. I'd like to be able to devote more time to it. I'd like to have that time to give a little more thought to some things and let it breathe a little bit. But like you said, there's something to the deadline too, where I got to finish this by this time. And I'm usually working on it till a couple hours before it goes up too, because I know.
Yeah.
And because I publish at 6 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. And sometimes I don't finish till 4:30 or something. But yeah, I would love to be able to do that and create more or write more and just have that be more a solid part of my life and my earnings.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that, what a lot of us who are really passionate about writing are here for is really trying to get more of a living doing what we love and are good at, and less working for other people. And it does look possible, doesn't it? That's what lovely about it.
People who are doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
And
they are.
That's encouraging.
It is very encouraging. And in my case, it is growing. My paid subscriber base is growing, and I'm hugely grateful for the support that I get that way.
I forget, do you offer something additional for paying subscribers?
Yeah, I'm doing writing challenges this year for paid subscribers with a sort of different focus each time. We're coming towards the end of my first writing challenge, which is called Writing Home, the challenge of writing home. And it's sort of memoir stroke therapeutic writing. That's writing about the concept of home, what home means, like looking at how our relationship with home, and quite often childhood home, but looking at other aspects of. Some of us have had multiple homes, homelessness, all sorts of things, and just looking at how that makes us who we are and our sense of fundamental security. And at the same time, looking at the possibility of healing and releasing traumas connected to home. Yeah, that's where we are. And I've just got my idea for the next writing challenge. I'm going to have a little break between them, but I've just got my idea for the next one, which is going to be on the 7 deadly sins. Yeah,
that's good.
I'm quite excited about that one.
Some good stuff out of that one.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing that as well. But of course, that's all. Yeah, Substack's taking up quite a lot of my week because I also have another Substack, which I have separated out. Except I've got 3. Isn't that awful?
No, I didn't get 3.
I've got my main one. I've got a specialist one for Kit Marlowe because I'm a Marlowe specialist, and it's just for people who are interested in Marlowe, which is a very small subsection of the population. But I do. I've got 150 subscribers or something, but I'm known as a Marlowe scholar, and I was invited last year to become patron of the UK's Marlowe Society. So that's quite an astounding thing to me, really. But I have a Marlowe biography, a new Marlowe biography. I've got new findings that I haven't published, but publishing right now in the UK is really weird, and I haven't got the right. I have to build a bit of head of steam behind this book. And then I found out, I knew actually because I'd spoken to him, but Stephen Greenblatt, who years ago got £1 million for writing Will in the World about Shakespeare, has got a Marlowe biography coming out this autumn. So that probably kills my book for another 2 years at least, if not longer. Probably longer. He's really well known. What am I going to do? It's like everyone's going to buy that book. Dark Renaissance. I know. And he interviewed me. He came to speak. Someone suggested to him that he speak to me, and we met in the British Library and chatted. And I hope I didn't say anything in terms of giving away what I know. I was thinking.
The fine line you had to walk there.
Yeah, sure, we could talk about Marlowe, but there's some stuff that I really mustn't tell you because it's like my original research. And of course, if you publish it, I'm done. But so I do that. And I also have another sideline, which is the Shakespeare authorship question, which is really so unpopular with so many people. I've disconnected it from my Ros Barber identity on Substack.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God. I know exactly.
How did you get interested in Marlowe originally?
Get interested in Marlowe because my first novel was about Marlowe. And that's also how I got involved in the authorship question, because I was using a kind of authorship question premise, which is imagine if Marlowe was the real author behind the works. And that was the premise for my first novel. And it was a theory that I hadn't actually been exposed to until I watched a documentary when I was seeking an idea for my creative writing PhD. And I thought I need something big that needs researching in order to get funding. And then I watched this documentary and the idea just fell into my lap because one of the academics there was very cross. He went, it's a ludicrous theory, but it would make a great novel. And I thought, oh, yeah, it would. I jumped in. And then when I started doing research into the theory, I got extremely interested in the authorship question. So I study the arguments and the evidence that are used on both sides. And it's partly my interest in psychology. The first degree was biology. And I'm extremely interested in neuroscience and theories of consciousness and psychology, and looking at things like confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance and the way that people argue on all sides of the debate. So whether they're arguing the orthodox narrative, Shakespeare of Stratford wrote it, or they think it's Francis Bacon or the Earl of Oxford or Marlowe. It's extremely interesting just studying the human aspect of that and the way that people utilize the same evidence in different ways for their arguments. So I basically have studied the authorship question for nearly 20 years now, and I've published quite a few peer-reviewed papers on it. I know. So it's another area that it's my academic area. And again, I just have to separate it out because it makes people very angry, and I don't want people to just be very angry with me about that. I'm fascinated by this thing. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure. And I know it's divisive, and I know that people have strong feelings about it for various reasons. But I agree with you. Like the whole psychology behind why are people invested in this narrative and why are some of them in this narrative, and using the same kind of facts to support their own viewpoint. That translates to so many other topics, I think, that I find interesting as well.
So this is one of the reasons why I think it's important. It's not so much that, I mean, there's lots of reasons why I think it's important, but people go, why do you care who wrote these books and plays, poems from 400 years ago? What does it matter? Whoever it is, they're dead. Why does it matter? How does it affect our reading of it? It's interesting, though, it does affect our reading of the text. So it does reflect on our ideas about authorship. The author isn't dead the way that some English academic departments still go, yeah, that's all sorted, death of the author, we're just looking at the text. You can't really escape your biases. You can't, people think they have, but in fact, they're bringing their idea of the author into the reading of the text. And so that's another fascinating aspect of it. But also, as you say, the whole psychology that goes along with other things about what people believe and don't believe and how they form those beliefs and how they stick to them even when they're provably wrong is just fascinating. And it's very widely applicable to now when we're living in this time of huge amounts of information, disinformation and misinformation. It's a valuable study. It has deep roots. So yeah, that's my other passion, but it's really hard making time for all the different things I'm interested in.
Now there's only so many hours in a day, and it slips away so quickly.
So quickly. Yeah, and I mustn't let this slip away without asking you some of the other things I was going to ask you. So let's get to that. I want to ask about titles. Just a little thing that I know so many writers have issues with titles, and titles are so important for gaining reader attention on Substack. And it doesn't matter how great your article is or your humor piece, whatever it is. If the title doesn't really just make someone want to read it straight away, do you do titles first or last, or is it a bit of a mix?
It's a mix. I generally have a working title up front, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just have TBD as the title, but a lot of times I'll have a working title, and then that will change because I'll either decide that I don't like it, it's not really conveying what I want it to convey, or I've the writing itself, the essay has gone in a slightly different direction than I thought it was going to go. And I needed a different title to better reflect that. One thing with titles that I have learned though is like earlier on, I wasn't putting as much thought into this needs to hook people. The title
Mm.
needs, because there's so many other things out there to read. I was more interested in having a clever title that reflected the piece, but sometimes it wasn't enough to really hook anyone. So I had to learn that lesson that of how, if I was just handing you an essay, here, please read this, the title could be what the title is, right? It doesn't really matter as much. But when you're trying, when there's this sea of people who are, should I read this? Should I read that? Should I read that? Really has to grab. And I did not pay as much attention to that initially as I should. And that's something I really do try to focus on.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? That title and the first line, and hook them and then just keep reeling them in. But if you haven't got them on the title, it doesn't matter how good the rest of the piece is. So it's a vitally important part of the game. And I don't think I always excel at the, I try and I do this thing. I think this is a great title. Really, I would definitely read this. And then it goes, and you get a very average response and you think, okay, I was wrong.
That's the thing. It's hard because we were talking about biases before, and it's, I think this is interesting. I think I would read this, but we have that where it's just a subject and maybe somebody else isn't. Titles are very hard. And I know there's a big trend of people putting them through. There's things online that evaluate your title. And do you ever do that?
I've done that, and I think it's crap. I think the things they came up with were really bad. It's like title tester, and it goes, yeah, you need to have, what do they say, motion words and something else. And it's like, whatever database they're using for this, I don't know. I think it's very poor. And I think they're very geared towards salesy stuff, or really tabloid news, kind of stuff that will maybe make a tabloid reader read.
And it's not like you can adjust the criteria either to value on. It's just one size fits all. And I don't think that's necessarily a good way to do it. And I don't, in fact, I tried it like once or twice. I didn't use what it suggested. I thought it was hard.
That's exactly my thing. I think twice I'd had a go and then thought, no, these are rubbish. They're not going to work on Substack. And really, it's all about your audience. It's all about who are your audience? What will they open? Who's Substack audience?
I think, like you said, I think it's more salesy. And I think if you're right, if your Substack is about how to succeed on Substack, then that's going to do wonders for you.
Yeah. Yeah, they're the big hitters, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of title that those kinds of tools can help with. I don't think the things you write about or the things I write about lend themselves to that kind of analysis.
No, they don't. Have you had any pieces that the response to them has surprised you?
Yeah, there was one called "We Need More Repercussions" that was basically talking about people's poor behavior and how they're getting away with it and they need to be shamed, and in a funny way. But that has been by far my most popular post, by far. And I was really, and it brought in a ton of new subscribers, and I did not see that coming at all. But it resonated. People agreed with, people were like, yeah, you're exactly right. People are so rude, all those kinds of things. And I think it was just maybe right topic, right tone at the right time. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nothing I could replicate. It's just happened.
I know, I think that's right. The thing sometimes I write, I go, this isn't going to be, and it isn't. It's never. Those things, they're not. And I'm now, if I get that feeling at all, I just immediately go, no, it's not, Roz.
If I catch myself going down that road, I'm like,
yeah, no, forget it. This will be very average. Might even be quite an underperformer.
Right.
But the things that resonate, you can't necessarily predict. I was surprised how much I ended up writing so much memoir, and but I felt very encouraged by the response. And I know there is a sense in which it's, yeah, people are very nosy and they love looking into your life. But what I loved about the response actually was people going, yes, this you've put into words, something I experienced. This sounds exactly like what I went through. And the writing is helping me process that, is what they're saying. And I thought that's fantastic, because I'd done a lot of my own kind of processing about difficult things that I went through earlier in my life. So I'm able to write about them quite clearly, because emotion is like static. I always think of it as electrical static, and it can make it hard to get clarity. When I started doing my emotional processing, trauma processing, what I began to experience is more and more mental clarity. I thought that my favorite thing about the whole process of releasing trauma was clarity. Okay, oh, I get stuff now. I can understand it. It all makes sense. It's all kind of logical and fits together. And I think it's helped me become a better writer. And the nicest thing about writing these pieces is when people respond and say it's helping them with their difficult experiences, being able to think about them in a certain way, see them in a new light or whatever.
You're a very confident writer, and you're a very talented writer, and you've been through a lot. And so you have a way of expressing those things and what you've learned from them and how you've healed from them in ways that people can really relate to. And I think it's a really specific kind of talent that you have in doing. And it's really, and I can see that it's helped me in various cases. And I read the comments a lot too. And I see it.
And that it just makes me feel what writers are like. They love to feel that they're doing something worthwhile. Making someone laugh is worthwhile. Helping someone heal is worthwhile. You just want to feel like your words are not pointless. And sometimes that's been amazing for that, because when I brought books of poetry, we used to do poetry readings, and sometimes someone would come up at the end and go, I love that poem about your mum, and I lost my mum last year. And you make that one-to-one connection with somebody, which made you feel like it was worth writing that poem just for that one conversation. But on top of that, you're just multiplying that effect and feeling people really benefiting from the skills I've developed in writing and being able to express these things. And I think feels like that's what I'm here for now. Just feels like that's as part of my purpose, even on the planet, is I've been through all this stuff and I've learned to write about it. And now here I am, and I'm in a position where it can actually be really helpful to people just to read the words. And that's exciting to me, to be honest. I love that part of
It's huge.
being here. Yeah, it's great. I want to talk to you about similes, because I love your similes. God, I made a little note of one in your latest piece. Where the hell was it? I can't find my thing now, can I? Of course I can't. Oh, yeah. He followed me like a stray dog that I'd just treated to a French fry. Someone, he wouldn't let you leave a conversation and you go to your car. And it's little touches. I love similes in humor writing.
I like a gift. Thank you. I see. That's funny. I appreciate that, because I tend to only use them if I feel like it can add to the humor in some way, even in a small kind of way. There's nothing laugh out loud funny about that one necessarily, but it's, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
It's a great parallel, and there's an image that comes along with it, but also there's this underlying thing about you gave him something he wanted, which is a little bit of attention, and now he won't leave you alone. There's that underlying story that goes on with it. There's the emotional aspect of it as well as a visual image. So it's really effective. I love it. And I so often I notice I like similes a lot. I use a lot of imagery, and I try to not overdo it. But I'm aware sometimes I go, maybe it's one too many images in that paragraph. Cut them down a bit. But I love them in humor writing, because I think so often the humor, there's that sort of maintained tone of the humor is there. If they just stitch it all together and keep it running, keep the engine running.
Yeah, thank you. And I feel the same way. And I did also try not to overdo it, because I feel like it becomes almost like a trek.
Yeah. It gets very showy, doesn't it?
Yeah. It feels, and also a crutch. It feels like a
Mm.
funny crutch where, oh, I could get a laugh about the dude. Yeah, maybe, but if it's not adding to the story in a genuine, natural, if it's forced, then it's cheap. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be cheap. I don't want to call attention. I don't want to take someone out of it, of the reading, and to marvel at some image that I just came up with. Want it to flow.
That's it. Yeah. It's about maintaining flow. And as you said, is that you don't want to take the reader out of the experience of just experiencing the thing that they're in. You don't want to make them conscious of the writing. I used, when I was teaching writing, talk about this aspect. If you look through a window, you don't want to be conscious of the glass. You want to just see the view. And if the glass has got, oh, we've got doodles on it, or it's got handprints on it or something, or bird shit, you notice that. You start to notice the writing instead of having the experience of being in what the writing is taking you into. And that, isn't it? Yeah.
I feel like it's like a spice, right? It can add to the flavor of the piece, but it can also overpower, hitting it too hard. And
yeah,
have to know the right recipe or measurement.
Another good simile, Chris. Yeah, it's like a spice. Thank you. I'll be using that myself. Talk a little bit about metaphysical stuff, because I got quite excited when I read your piece about manifesting Jackie Mason. Now, you didn't make a huge amount of it, but I love that story so much. I'd like you, to anyone who hasn't read that piece, just give us a little bit. It's always fun to read it. I was there. Oh, the written version's best because I worked on it. But if you could talk a little bit of what that was about.
Sure. It's very silly. It's a silly example, I think, but it is interesting. So my friend Bill and I, we were in our early 20s, and we went to New York for a few days just to goof around, hit some clubs, do that kind of stuff. And we were sharing a room. We checked into the room and we turned on the TV when we got there. And there was this cartoon on that's called, what is it called? I forget what it's called, but it's part of the Pink Panther cartoon. It was a sub cartoon in a Pink Panther. And there's a voice that is based on Jackie Mason. It's not Jackie Mason actually doing the voice, but it's an impression of Jackie Mason. So my friend Bill and I started just talking like Jackie Mason. We thought it was hilarious, just like out of nowhere to just keep talking like him during this trip. And so the next day, I think we saw an autographed picture of Jackie Mason, and I put this in the estimating for a day if it was a restaurant or what it was. The next day we saw another one, and we kept seeing them in different businesses. It was really bizarre. It was so strange. And every time we go, hey, Jackie Mason. And we would laugh about it because we've been talking like him. And the last day we were there, we're coming out of a restaurant, and I look and somebody getting in another car, and like the chauffeur had opened the back door, and it was Jackie Mason. And I went to my friend, hey, Jackie Mason. And Jackie Mason says, how are you, my friend? Or hello, my friend, something like that. And we just was like, what in the world just happened here? Why is Jackie Mason appearing in front of us all of a sudden after this Jackie Mason filled trip? It was so bizarre, but so funny at the same time.
Love it so much. And again, I really do see that as a manifestation thing happening. Was it because you weren't invested in it? You weren't trying to make it happen. But you had absolutely summoned the sort of energy and spirit of it, and with the lightheartedness, and just
I think so. I don't know. Like, it's too strange and too much of a coincidence, which I don't know how you feel about coincidences, but I don't know that they're actually coincident.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah.
So I agree with you. Something happened there that brought this all together and then deposited Jackie Mason right in front of our faces at the end of this Jackie Mason filled adventure.
Yeah, a little bit of magic, right? But this stuff, metaphysical stuff, I'm really into because I've had some pretty strange, interesting experiences myself. So it is one of the reasons why I wanted to connect with you. Other stuff that you're prepared to talk about in terms of the weird and wonderful.
Can I hear one of yours first, though?
Okay. This is one of my favorite things. I was working on the fact that I was losing a lot of stuff, right? Now, my husband's ahead of the game with this. So he was quite a spiritual person, and I was just coming in fresh. I came from a sort of atheist background, science, very rational, feet on the ground materialism. Yeah, I accepted it all. He opened my eyes to some other possibilities, shall we say. He's very strongly into this sort of idea of the language you use makes a big difference, right? So the stuff that you say can manifest into reality, whether you want it or not. So be careful what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And some examples of that. But, okay, so that one of the ones that really blew my mind, and it's quite early on and it's quite minor, but I've been working on losing stuff. And he had said what happened was because I had just because of my childhood and losing my brother and losing my dad, if I lost anything, and it could be quite minor, I'd have a complete meltdown over it. Oh my God, it's lost. Really react badly. And he started saying, if you say it's lost, it is. If you say I've temporarily mislaid it and it's coming back to me, you've got a much better chance of redeeming. Because I had literally, when I was a teenager, my dad had given me the silver pen and I was using it to write some poems into a book in a room on my own where no one else was and no one else was in the house. The phone rang. I went outside the room, answered the phone, called for my mother. She came and took the phone. I went back into the room where I was and my pen wasn't there and I never found it again. It just disapparated and makes no sense whatsoever. So I started manifesting losing things, and I've been doing it all my life, that things would just vanish. And he taught me how to start having faith. They weren't lost. They were temporarily, I don't know, it's some kind of glitch. And if I could just say it's temporarily out of my awareness, I might be able to, they might come back. And I'd started playing with this and I've had some success. So it was interesting. And I thought, so I would feel my panic rise and I'd feel that I'm going to go into the habitual panic of I've lost something. Oh my God. And I would go, no, it's just temporarily outside my awareness. It's coming back. And I'd start visualizing it coming back. So here's the story that I was getting around to. I'm walking our dog, who was quite young, was a sort of a teenager at the time. And he was good for being off the lead on the lawns in the sort of park area. But to get home, we had to cross the road and he wasn't disciplined enough to go across the road without being on the lead. So I'd taken his lead off and I had it round my neck. And then I walked him up the lawns and back again. And I needed now to cross the road and put the lead on. And the lead wasn't there. It wasn't round my neck. Now, important pre-story is 2 weeks earlier, my son had taken him down to the beach and had lost his collar. And we were very cross about him losing the collar because it had belonged to our previous dog and it had got this sort of sentimental value. And had taken it off when the dog went for a swim and then it was gone. And we'd gone and looked for it. Paul had gone, looked for it. I'd looked for it. It just wasn't there anymore. Yeah. So collar had gone 2 weeks earlier. On this walk, I thought, okay, don't panic. Obviously, I need the lead for him to safely cross the road, but I'm going to just retrace my steps and look very carefully and believe that the lead is coming. Don't panic. Believe the lead's coming back. I went all the way up the lawns and I hadn't seen it anywhere. And I could feel panic rising when I was going, no, I visualized repeatedly, happily putting the dog on the lead, being so relieved and overjoyed that I had the lead and I could set across the road. And so I was walking on visualizing, putting him on the lead. And as I walked past, I saw a bin and there was a long piece of quite thick string hanging out of it like a temptation going, you could take this piece of string. And I thought, that's like not having faith. Like, I'm not taking the piece of string out of the bin. I'm going to continue to visualize putting him on the lead. The lead is coming back to me. Just coming back, and I just visualize my happiness. And it's more than visualization, is that you've got to feel how you're going to feel. So I went, I feel really happy. And so I'm just overjoyed. It's just brilliant. He's back on the lead and I'm feeling all this joy that my dog's back on the lead. Anyway, I'd done the trip up and I'd come back to the point where I'd originally noticed the lead was missing and I still hadn't found it, which obviously doesn't bode well. But then I looked to my left on the railings and there was the lead, and right next to it there was the collar. The collar that had been lost 2 weeks earlier.
Oh my God. I didn't see anything.
No one can know that from the same dog. But it's like, wow, you don't just get the lead, you get the collar as well. Well,
Wow. That is
yeah,
wild.
it was powerful. And I went, that's so good.
That would be a game changer. Like that has to affect the way you perceive things from now
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
There's no explanation for that.
No. And someone I follow who's into all this metaphysical stuff, and I've been to see her live as well. She talks about NOE experiences, no other explanation. NOEs. And she came from originally, Susan Guzman is her name. She's a medium now, but she was very high up in the US military. And you don't get more kind of feet on the ground than being very high up in the US military. She was connected to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She's been on Air Force One. She's under several presidents, and now she's a medium. So but I love how down to earth she is. And of course, the military love acronyms. So that's why she got NOE.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's true. Are you familiar with disappearing object phenomenon?
I've heard about it and I've read about it. Do you want to tell me a bit about that?
It's this phenomenon where people, just like what you said with your pen, you put it down, you know where you put it, you leave the room, you come back and it's not there. And there was no one else around.
No.
No animal in the room that could have knocked it up. It just isn't there anymore. And this happens to people all the time. And sometimes it turns up in another room, or sometimes it never turns up. But sometimes I've read cases of things dropping from the air. And I could get there and like 5, 6 days later, and it's just there. And you have to be a little skeptical with things you read on the internet and things, but you can tell when accounts are real and when they're sincere. And there's been so many accounts of these things that even if 1% are real, even if 1% of them are true, then isn't that crazy? Isn't that
I absolutely had it with that pen. It never turned up, and there was no reason for it not to turn up. It was right next to my little poetry notebook I was on the carpet in the middle of the room. I wasn't on a sofa where it could slip down the side. I was kneeling on the carpet, on the floor, in a fairly empty room and with no people around, no pets. And all I did was went and answered a call, said, "Mum, it's for you," came back and it was gone and I never saw it again.
similar thing happened to me? I was going to my parents' house for a dinner. It's like a Sunday. And I was bringing my dog with me, as I always do. And I had a plastic bag with his food in it. And I put it on the passenger seat. So I remember doing it. We get to my parents' house. I look over to get the bag and it's gone. It's gone. So I'm like, crap, where did it go? And I don't drive. My dog does not like the car. So I don't take a lot of crazy turns. I don't go too fast. But still, I think I must have rolled off. And I searched that car everywhere it could be. It could possibly be. And it's not there. It's just gone. So then I start thinking, maybe I remember putting there, but maybe I'm just kidding myself. Maybe it's at home. Maybe it's by where my keys were. And I just went home and it's not there either. And I even had my young nephew was there who has smaller hands than I do. And could you just reach everywhere you can reach in this car and see if you can find this? And it's not there. And that was a few years ago and it's never turned up. So it was just very strange.
Did you make any stops? Did you stop to get gas or anything like that along the way?
No.
Yeah.
There's no explanation.
There is no explanation. And the world is actually much weirder than we often are prepared to accept. I think the thing is that once you start being aware of this and the sort of metaphysical realities to our physical world, the layers, other things can happen. And I'm being more open to those things, more of those things happen. I want to ask a question about writing related to this. Do you feel there's any metaphysical qualities to the writing process for you?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I do think that sometimes we pull ideas in terms of phrase, and I've had the experience where I'm like, where did that come from?
Mm.
Like, where in the world did that just come from? Because there are times when it feels like some kind of, I don't want to say this like in a very heady way, like I'm doing God's work here, but it feels like it was given to me. Do you know what I mean?
I
And
do
that's not
know.
time, but it does. There are occasions when I feel like that happens, when you make connections between certain things that maybe aren't obvious, but they do make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it just feels a little bit like, oh, you were supposed to put that together in that way. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. No, I often have the experience of being given stuff, feeling that it's come through me as opposed to being generated by me. And quite often I look at things I've written, certain things I've written, and I don't really feel like I wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I actually look at it and go, and people go, "Wow, how did you write that?" And I'm going, "I actually don't know," and I couldn't replicate it. I couldn't make that happen because it's not a making thing. For me, writing is very much a sort of allowing the words, just settling right down and just allowing the words to arrive. I used
Yeah.
to do a lot of efforting, and I don't think that's as productive as just getting yourself in the state where the words just flow and arrive.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I find really interesting about you is that you did come from a scientific background and a very logical background and materialism,
Mm.
but made this shift. And I love that. I love hearing about people who make those kinds of transitions and start to see the world differently based on their own experiences. I think it's
Yeah.
really I was gonna say, I think we were talking about biases before, right? And I think
Mm.
so many scientists are closed off to possibilities because they're not scientifically explained or
Yeah.
explainable. And it almost makes me laugh a little bit because I feel like there's we don't understand anything.
There's loads of stuff we don't understand. And science is, it's not like it's complete and finished. And our understanding of the world is still very limited. Look, I take great sort of interest in the intersection of science and spirituality through quantum physics, because I think that's where the huge mysteries are, where they go, whoa, how does the quantum entanglement, these things that don't appear to be connected, that are clearly are connected, that will explain how the metaphysical world works. These weird things that happen, the things that lots of people will say are coincidences, but they're too bizarre, too really impossible. But they're not impossible when you accept the various weird phenomena that quantum mechanics has come up with. So observer effects and various aspects of the quantum universe. I think we're all just this very complex arrangement of electrical charge. We and the environment that we're in. That's all it is. We have this sense of that we're separate. We're separate from other people. We're separate from our surroundings. But I have had an experience once where all of that, like the Matrix, all of that dissolved. And it was an extraordinary thing. It was on a dog walk, dog the best. It was about 20 minutes where I was aware of being just energy. I was aware I was also in a body and walking my dog, but I was aware of everything being energy, literally, and interconnected, like a sort of flow. Like there was me, there was the grass, there was the air, there was the light, there was the sound of the traffic, there was the dog. And all of these things were just energy in a sort of matrix, in a connected web. I didn't want to come in from that walk at all. And I was aware I had to, because I had to come back into reality.
That's
So, yeah, it was. And again, that's another sort of very strongly life-changing, sort of paradigm-changing experience, which I tried to write about in my second novel. I wrote about it and whether I've succeeded in really getting across. When you have something happen to you that feels that profound and it's so outside most people's experiences, quite hard to communicate. in words, words are not adequate to the actual experience of being at one with everything around.
Yeah, so something is fine.
Yeah, but it does make you aware that, yeah, I'm sure I'm still a human and I still get annoyed and I still treat myself quite often as separate from everyone and everything around me, but I'm carrying within me a deep knowledge of the fact that we're not separate,
Right.
that we are connected and we are energetically interlinked with, actually, through this network of everything, being in touch with everything, but very much so with anyone that we interact with, that we live with, that we have interacted with in the past. I've had some very interesting coincidences. I wrote about one on a Substack note. I'm going to not go on for too long, but I'm really enjoying this. I wrote about one on a Substack note recently where I hadn't had any contact with my son's ex-girlfriend who used to live with us, and I loved her like a daughter, for 2 years. After she left that relationship, and they were together for 8 years, and she'd lived with us for a good, I don't know, maybe 4 years of that. We'd gone for a coffee a couple of times, but it was hard because it just felt a bit like I was betraying him because she'd left him and he was devastated. But then after 2 years of no messages, no contact whatsoever, I threw out the last remnant of her in the house, which was a cardboard box that had her name on it, that this large mirror went into, which I kept thinking, and he kept thinking she would take the mirror because she bought it just before she left and it was put up on the wall. And I sent her a few messages saying, do you want the mirror? And she never replied. And it was in the hallway outside his room. And in the end, I just went, we're throwing this out. I'm getting rid of this. Why have we got this cardboard box? It's going. And I broke it up and I put it out in the recycling. And the very next day, I got a text message from her after 2 years saying, been thinking about you guys. How are you? And I went, I know why you sent that message. You don't. But I know that I caused a disturbance in the force.
You did. Like,
I cut this time by throwing out the cardboard box. And actually, isn't that beautiful that we are connected in that energetic way?
Yeah, and I think people experience these kinds of things and do chalk it up to, oh, that was an interesting coincidence or something. But when you pay attention, it's not just a coincidence. Like, we've all had the experience of thinking of someone and then they text you right away. They just pop in your head for some reason and then you get a text or a call from them or something like that.
Yeah.
And we just chalk it up to whatever. But so many things like that happen. Like, I think I mentioned in a note one time, like, you have the sensation of being watched.
Yes.
And you feel it. You feel someone's eyes on you and you can't see them.
Yeah.
We've all had that, but no one really takes the next step to think about what that might mean.
This was the beginning for me when I was doing my science degree. So I was an 18-year-old undergraduate. And that was when I started noticing that, because I knew I was being looked at when I was on campus, and I'd turn around and I'd immediately pinpoint who was staring at me. And I thought, hang on, how is that working? What sense is allowing me to pinpoint know when someone's staring? Of course, evolutionary speaking, it's extremely useful because that person might be a predatory person. And it's a great sense to have. And it is definitely a one that would help you survive longer and pass on your genes. So therefore, in evolutionary terms, extremely useful sense. It makes total sense that you would develop it. But I was going, science is not explaining that. And why are people not even why are they not even looking into it?
And I've heard skeptics like,
then years later, probably about 10 years after I finished my degree, or not that, somewhere around there, Rupert Sheldrake published, the biologist as well, published a book called The Sense of Being Stared At. He's investigated these weird phenomena that mainstream biology, basically it's quantum biology is what we're talking about, and people have not gone that far. And quantum biology is basically Rupert Sheldrake and a few other, but not very many people involved in that at all. And I don't think it's even recognized as a field. But of course it makes sense. This is the quantum universe. So of course biology is quantum, chemistry is quantum, psychology is quantum, everything's quantum, right?
Yep.
Fundamental building blocks is this. This is how small we go. You can't just say, oh, it's quantum, all very interesting, but it's a Newtonian universe in everything apart from physics. It's not true. And that sense of being stared at is fundamental. I think that was where I began to wake up to the possibilities that I would later experience in other ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was it for me too, because I've heard skeptics try to dismiss it as, well, you probably heard something, or you heard the rustling of a leaf or their footstep, or you caught them out of the corner of your eye. And okay, when that's the case and when that's not the case.
Yeah.
Definitely part.
It was like in quite crowded situations where it's not about, you're not going to hear it. It's not about a leaf or a twig in a forest. There are a lot of people on campus around you, and the person who's staring at you is behind you. So it's not like you caught, you feel it, you know it. Similarly, when you walk into a room, you can feel the energy in that room, whether it's hostile. Oh,
that's good one.
Yeah. So we sense energy. We just don't necessarily admit it to ourselves, but we do sense it in the sense of, groups of people, a room full of people will react quite differently depending on what the group energy is created there. I've had the experience of reading the same set of poems on 2 consecutive nights to 2 different audiences in London, one of whom absolutely loved me. They were warm and open, and they were warm and open before I opened my mouth. They were ready to hear me. And the next night, they were horrific. They were cold. They were hostile. They hated it. Same poems, but it was very hard to deliver them in the same way with that energy, as that wall of energy. Yeah.
Did you feel that coming out? Was it something immediately before you?
Well, I didn't realize quite what happened was actually this is why introductions are so important. I felt like the person who was introducing the night didn't like me very much, didn't think much of me. And she was also a little bit, the poetry world can be a bit backbiting, and I'd say she's one of those people. Very competitive, very, what's the right word? I don't know, propriety, or it's like she's got territory she needs to guard. And I'm not one of her group, her clique. But when she introduced me with something that set the audience completely against me. She gave me a horrific introduction because she read something. Someone had compared she read off the back of my book, and it said something like, I don't know, when you read one of Barberverse sonnets, feel like it comes straight out of the pen of Shakespeare or something like that. It was very hyperbolic, and my publisher thought this would be great to put on the back of my book. But she read it with a total sort of sneer. And then she added some little comment to make it very clear she thought I was complete shit and about me at all. And it was just awful. The effect immediately. I don't think the audience possibly were that warm anyway, because they were very cool. They were very cool people. I'm not a cool person in that way. They were very they're performing themselves, all their masks on. I'm very the opposite of that. I don't really fit well into those environments. And then she did that, and then I was dead. That just killed me. There's nothing I could have done from that point to win that audience over, because they just hated me from the off. That I would deign to have something like that on my book cover. Yes.
It's so uncomfortable.
Really bad. It's been so lovely chatting with you, Chris.
I have so much fun.
It's been a lot of fun for me too. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. I'll go and have some food, and you can get on with the rest of your day. But I will, maybe speak to you another time.
Thank you so much for asking me to do this. It was so much fun. I had a blast. Love to do it again.
Brilliant. All right, then. Take care, Chris. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.